finally off the phone there, man. I tell you what, sometimes you just, woo, baby. Woo, baby. I'm getting one more thing set up here so that way Ray can come on and give me a call and we'll get this bad boy going on the road. Jeez, I was not expecting that phone call before I came on. It was pretty intense. So, obviously, Ray's going to be coming on today, and we'll just be having a general conversation here. We're going to review some different studies and things and take a look at different options and statements that are made and just kind of dissect it all and look at it from a purely a scientific point of view, okay? And I want to preface this, obviously, one of the big things that we're going to be talking about today is humic acid. And one of the main thing I want to stress here is that nobody's saying humic acid is not effective at all. Humic acid is a tool in the toolbox that does have methods of being used successfully. The point that we're going after here is dealing with the solubility of phosphorus in different scenarios and how that can affect the plant. So what I've been doing in the off time is just going ahead and compiling a bunch of information. It was kind of interesting. I had a lot of people sending me information to go ahead and review. And so we were able to put together a pretty significant lists. That's not correct English, but I said it, whatever. We put together a pretty significant list of different studies, and you start to see kind of some different trends, we'll put it that way. But then there's also some surprises too. So like I said, I want to preface this that there's nothing wrong with humic acid. I think it's a good product. It's a good tool in the toolbox. And we're going to talk about where specifically it can shine as a tool in the toolbox. And also some of those different formulations you see, how they can be effective. Look at Get some deep, dark music in there. All right. So I'm going to take a break, and when we come back, Ray, feel free to go ahead and call in when we come back, and we'll get this bad boy going. Hey, Frank, I love you too, sir. I love you. Tom, there ain't no YouTube battle. This ain't no YouTube battle. All right, hang on. More after the break.
Hey, Green Industry Pros. Turfs Up Radio is celebrating what a great first year we had and wants to give you $100 just for being involved. That's right. All you have to do is visit turfsupradio.com/shout out for 100 and follow a few easy steps. When you hear your name live on the radio, we're going to send you a crisp $100 bill. So be sure to visit turfsupradio.com/shout out for 100 to claim your cash. And remember, Turfs Up Radio, your industry, your station.
Eric the Turf Teacher Jones. Oh, yeah! The morning show, Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 a.m. And keeping up with Mr. Jones, Mondays at 6 to 8 p.m. Teaching you life lessons, business strategies, and leadership.
Let's grow together. Turfs Up Radio, your industry, your station.
Hey guys, it's Frank Borg. More lawn care pros are working on their business rather than in them with the Lawn Buddy app. Lawn Buddy puts you in the driver's seat right along with your employees, helping you to guide them through their work while you focus on growth. With the Lawn Buddy app, you'll be more confident that work is being done and more money is being made faster. To learn how Lawn Buddy can help your lawn care business, visit lawnbuddy.com or simply download the Lawn Buddy app today. Great job, guys.
Hey, landscape pros, are you tired of digging through rocks and roots and breaking shovels in the process? Then it's time you checked out the Geo Ripper 616. It's a landscaper's dream with the Makita 6 Series 2-cycle engine producing over 4 horsepower of raw performance. The 616 digs deep in up to 16 inches of toughest soils. miles. Lighting, landscape, and irrigation contractors already love this improved lightweight trencher with its ability to get in and get out faster, easier, and with less ground disturbance, and you will too. This redesigned Geo Ripper 616 comes with 2 heavy-duty digging chains and a whole mess of helpful extras. To learn more about the Geo Ripper and how it can help you out in the field, visit georipper.com today.
And we have on here the good Dr. Ray. Are you there, good sir?
I'm here.
Oh, dang it, Ray. You're coming through one channel. Let me call you right back.
Oh, yeah.
He was only coming through one headphone, and when that happens, I can't go very, very long when it's only on my left one. I'd have to switch it back and forth or hold it on my forehead or something. Yes, but you're not ported through the board. Let me hit a few buttons here and see if I can get you through the board. Try me now.
Okay.
Yeah, there you are. There you are. All right, so Ray, thank you for taking the time out of your Friday to come on and talk. As we know, we did the show on Monday, and apparently gets a little controversial. And so I gave the preface before we came on here today. Nobody's saying Humic does not work. That's not the point that anybody's trying to make here. Humic is a good tool in the toolbox. It has very specific instances where it's effective, and we'll get to that, Ray. We will get to that. And so, as one of the things I'll go ahead and just say I did, and this is going to be a private video. I'm not going to share it right now with the masses. But one of the things I did was yesterday I went to the lab. We have a lab here in Knoxville. And what I did was I took 2 sources of phosphorus. I took a potassium phosphate and also took a phosphoric acid, and I mixed about 20 milliliters of each into a clear plastic container just to watch what would happen. The phosphoric acid obviously is going to have a pH of about a 1, so pretty strong phosphorus. 1 is a very pure, very high concentration of phosphorus, and 2 is very, very low pH. So one could expect, Ray, tell me if I'm wrong, one could expect if you took a weak acid with a low pH and mixed it with a humic-based material, that there is potential for fallout on that alone. Am I right?
That is correct. Because you are then going to be precipitating out the humic.
That too. Exactly. So the humic at that point would fall out of solution, because the general rule of thumb is that humic acid, now remember, there are humic substances, and that is made up by multiple different molecules. And you'll have humin, which is the largest molecule. You'll have humic acid, which is the next smallest molecule. Then you'll have fulvic acid, which is the next smallest molecule. And then you'll have ulmic acid, which is the smallest molecule. So they order in size of molecular weight and size, really. So I took this one. Actually, let's get the this here that I'm showing to the camera is this is just humic acid. Okay. Let me see if I can get the camera to focus. This is just humic acid that has set in this container. So you see about what it looks like. A little clingy to the sides. Pretty freaking clear material there. Now, what this one is this is phosphoric acid and humic acid. And as you can see, it has actually formed a solid precipitate on the edge. I don't know if the camera's picking that up super well, but if you look, you'll see where it's clung to it. Now, I topped this off too with a fairly large amount of water. I put about 50 mils of water in it because I was worried about phosphoric acid being in a container by itself. Then we took a potassium phosphate and mixed it with a humic acid. As you can see, this one has even more precipitate that formed throughout the course of the bottle. Hey, they're saying I'm blurry because of the way I have the camera focus going now. So clearly, these here have all precipitated out, aside from just the straight humic acid. So pretty simple there, and I did that all in a 24-minute video that I don't know, I'll do something with. I don't know. But I figure while we go ahead and I mean, that's pretty easily replicable in a lab. Have you ever experienced that, Ray, in your dealings?
Yes, I have. I know that I cannot mix any kind of acidifying soil amendment such as citric acid or sulfuric acid with humic. I also know that I cannot mix this product called 06020 from this company called Haifa, because that is a product that when it is dissolved in water, it forms phosphoric acid in the tank mix. So that also turns into a solid, large particle, heavy precipitate. I also know that, you may not mix anything containing non-chelated iron, such as ferrous sulfate with humic. You also cannot mix anything containing calcium, magnesium, or what else? One more thing. And any kind of phosphorus, irregardless of its source. So if it's something containing ammonium phosphate or potassium phosphate, no good. The phosphate will react with the humic and form a large particle insoluble precipitate.
Okay. I that was a great show, Ray. I appreciate you coming on. I think we're going to call it right there.
Yeah.
the great debate. No, I kid. And so I thought I would go into a couple of studies that I went ahead and pulled up. Like, let's see, where is this first one I wanted to talk about? Okay, so the first one I looked at was the effect of humic acids on the availability of phosphorus fertilizers in alkaline soil. And I was like, great, this is perfect because we're actually going to look at phosphorus availability in alkaline soil, right? And as you start to dissect the study, the humic acids that were used, Ray, were a low molecular weight, 1.15 pH humic acid.
Okay. You know what 1.15 pH humic acid is? That sounds to me like that is more like another product that I'm familiar with called fulvic acid. And fulvic acid, on the other hand, does not have the compatibility issues that you see with the high molecular weight humic type products. And just as we talked about on Monday's show, there is a huge difference in humic versus fulvic.
Exactly. And as a general rule of thumb, throughout the majority of these, that was the big thing you noticed was during the preparation, you would see something like a water extraction. If you're doing a water extraction to derive humic acid, are you actually getting humic acid through a water extraction?
No. In fact, if you're doing a purely water-based extraction process, you're most likely to be getting the fulvic and humic portion of that organic matter.
So again, we're back into another situation where, yes, this qualifies as a humic substance, but in reality, what we're actually dealing with even though it may be called a humic substance, what we're dealing with is not actually humic acid?
I think that's a fair statement at this point. I think that's a very fair statement. And I also know that when you're talking about a fulvic or even omic product, I mean, I'm not sure I've ever seen any omic type products on the market. I do use a actual fulvic acid powder that, when tank mixed with various soil amendments and nutrient sources, is completely compatible without any precipitation occurring or gelling or any kind of insolubility. And in fact, fulvic has been, demonstrated anecdotally to chelate various nutrients and then force uptake through leaves.
And that kind of happens through multiple different pathways, right? So you have the chelation part of it, but also through the hormonal signaling pathway as well. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct.
So in effect, by hormonally biostimulating the plant, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and tell the audience here, we know that to be through the auxin pathways. Through the auxin pathways, we are stimulating plant growth, which in turn puts together a plant that is demanding more nutrients. And in turn, those nutrients have been chelated by fulvic acid, allowing for greater tissue concentrations and performance.
Sure. That is entirely plausible. Is that you stimulate some growth, and then via that stimulated growth, you then have a plant that is actively uptaking nutrients, because with that active growth comes general increase in metabolic activity, and therefore you have a plant that will uptake whatever you're applying to it. It's just basic.
So in terms of chelation and nutrient availability, that if you're going to use a humic-based substance, we're just kind of making a vague generalization here. Now that we know a humic-based substance, and there's other videos out there. There's another video out there that shows what happens even if you take a salt of a metal like ferrous sulfate and you mix it with humic and it congeals or precipitates out. That's no longer soluble. That's no longer plant available. But if you still wanted to use a humic-based substance and you still wanted to apply ferrous sulfate, which is iron, everybody listen, that's just, a liquid iron is typically just ferrous sulfate dissolved in water, that you could then use a humic-based substance like fulvic acid, and that would be okay?
That would definitely be okay. Because I made tank mixes, for example, that contained up to 2 ounces per gallon of ferrous sulfate heptahydrate and an ounce per gallon of the commercially available, I think, 85 or 90% fulvic acid, and that formed in actual solution.
All right. So that I think we've got that piece figured out. Okay. It works with salts and metals. Your fulvic fraction is going to work with the phosphorus as well, right? We got tank mix compatibility there. Okay. Now, while I was digging through this, and you may know the answer to this, you may not know the answer to this, and so I'll kind of give you and everybody listening just kind of a general rundown here. This is another study, and this one here is pretty interesting because this is the comparison of a soluble phosphorus source and the comparison of an insoluble phosphorus source on a calcareous soil growing wheat. So what was interesting, Ray, is they had this calcareous soil, and they used a rock phosphate against a super phosphate. What ended up happening was that at high rates of humic, so we're talking about this was Sigma Aldrich concentrated powder at 120 pounds an acre of this concentrated powder. When combined with an insoluble phosphorus source, this particular one being rock phosphate, not plain available, secondarily available kind of deal, you actually saw an increase in plant performance. Now, I'm going to caveat that. What they stated was that the effect of humic acid on plants is also dependent on the P source used. Applications of humic acid with low-grade phosphate rock may have benefited wheat actually due to calcium, iron, and aluminum complexation present in the rock phosphate. Regardless of the solubilization of the phosphorus. So where I'm going with this is, what do you think in that specific example where we're talking about wheat on a calcareous soil, typically high pH soil, that you're seeing all of a sudden better plant performance at high rates of humic acid like that? Where we're talking, so this would be let's see here. This would be the equivalent of 120 pounds. So that would roughly be 120 gallons an acre. So roughly 3 gallons per 1,000 square feet. What do you think is taking place there?
What I suspect is taking place is that the excessive calcium is probably being complexed with that humic. It's just being complexed and taken out of the soil solution, because as I just said earlier, humic will form an insoluble and unavailable complex with humic. Like you take humic acid and say if I were to try to stir in some calcium nitrate, which is infinitely soluble with water, if I try to make a tank mix with humic and calcium nitrate, I'm going to make a brick in my sprayer. So that's just complexation, and the issue in these calcareous soils is, of course, extremely high amounts of available calcium, secondarily magnesium, and I don't count sodium because sodium is soluble, so that's not a problem. But the excess of calcium is most likely complexed and removed from the soil. Next, what is that actual humic? Is there some fulvic present that is not, stated in the analysis? Because I know that various humic products do not have any indication that they also contain a fulvic and ohmic fraction, but then you can check for that fraction very easily by mixing that with a mild acid like, say, citric or phosphoric acid, and watch all of the humic part fall to the bottom and the fulvic remain, in the water solution.
Yeah, and I'll stop you right there. That I did a little digging into Sigma Aldrich to see what they had, and it is their tech grade material, and it does not state specifically what their manufacturing method is. Even on their MSDS, they did not state if it was a hydroxide treated Leonardite. None of that was stated. Now, what they do state is that they have a humic acid technical grade with a very large molecular weight, and this was the only one I saw that actually listed the molecular weight of somewhere around 500,000 versus, and then I believe the majority of the fulvic acids I saw were somewhere around less than, say, 10,000.
Right. So it is all about, what is that actual humic product composed of? What's its composition? What is the ratio of humic to fulvic in that product? Because the other thing that can happen is once you've saturated that area with that particular product and all of the humic has complexed with that calcium, what's left is the fulvic, and now that fulvic is then free to combine with and start chelating all of your essential nutrients that were previously unavailable, be it micronutrients, be it phosphorus, be it potassium, because we all know that humic and fulvic just loves potassium, right? So that is a possible mode of action, is that you saturate an area with humic, and that humic will then bind up with all of the undesirable elements in the soil and get it out of the soil solution.
That's I don't know how many people at home kind of followed along there, but that's very, very interesting. And so what Ray is saying here is that by making these very high we know that humic materials react with certain parts of some of these ingredients, right? We know that, and I'm going to say these distinctively. When I'm talking about humic acid, I'm talking about only the humic acid molecule. When I'm talking about fulvic acid, I'm talking about only the fulvic acid molecule. When you take humic acid and apply it at a very high rate to the soil, especially in a soil that's very high in calcium, like this one here with the wheat growing on it, that as you approach that higher threshold, which is interesting, Ray, because you didn't see the phosphorus uptake rate increase at a rate of 20 pounds an acre. But as you got to 40 pounds an acre, you started to see it. As you got to 60 pounds an acre, you started to see it even more. That was kind of the pinnacle. As you got to 80 pounds an acre, and so when I'm talking about, I'm talking about 80 gallons would be the liquid of equivalent of like a 12% solution of humic acid. As you got to 80, it began to drop, and as you got to 100, which would be 200. I'm sorry. As you got to 100 gallons an acre, that's where you started to get your fall off, where phosphorus was no longer available. And the interesting they noted is that as you got that high, actually nothing was left to become available to the plant. You saw lower tissue levels of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, so on and so forth. So what you're saying is that the humic, the concentration of humic being applied goes ahead and reacts with the calcium in the soil, because we know it's high in calcium. And what you're going to be left with is the real workhorse, being fulvic acid in this instance, to be able to work its magic in the soil and offer chelation to what's left that hasn't been precipitated out by the humic fraction.
That's right. That is correct. And that is where there's at some point an optimum amount of humic or crude humic and fulvic that may be applied. And then I'm also acutely aware of how if you overdo your humic, you then are going backwards, because the humic then acts like a binding agent. I almost say that it behaves like activated charcoal. where it'll just absorb everything out of the soil and bind to it and make it plant unavailable.
Yeah, it's the old biochar conundrum we ran into, where we thought more biochar was better, and in return, what we actually saw was a significant decrease in plant performance as the rates increased.
Right. So you have this point where it is not a true statement that you can apply as much as you want, as often as you want, and just saturate the soil. You just can't do it, because I know the products that I use, as far as Humic goes, they have like a pretty strict ceiling of 12 pounds per acre per year. They don't suggest that you go above that.
See, I've never seen an upper limit threshold, and in fact, this study here, and the reason why I'm going after wheat is that wheat and corn are going to be the most closely related to what we deal with in lawns. It's not the same, but most closely related. I don't know. I completely lost my train of thought there because I started reading something else. Anyway, looking at these studies, this is the first instance where I see just a definitive rate here. But we're talking about a rate, Ray, and I was actually wrong. I'm talking about 100 gallons an acre is the optimum rate in these high calcium soils, high pH soils. At 100 gallons an acre, that's 3 gallons per 1,000 square feet. That may cost $30, $60 a 1,000 square feet to even apply that rate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'll cost that much. But if you get the results, if you get the long-term correction, then that may indeed be almost worth it. That may be worth it, because if you get long-term binding of all of the excess of calcium, because as you know, one of my procedures for high calcium soil is to actually get sulfuric or citric acid in there and try to leach out all of that calcium.
Yeah, and so again, kind of a different way of going about this, where in this instance, effectively what's happening is that you're reacting out all the calcium with the excess calcium, and with calcium, we got to be clear here. You're talking about excess carbonates, excess bicarbonates. That's going to react with the humic fraction first, right? And
right.
you can do the same thing. You can achieve the same result in a different manner. The other manner would be to use an acid like sulfuric acid or frequent applications of citric acid. What happens when you make that application? What's taking place with your calcium carbonate and your calcium bicarbonates when you're applying sulfuric acid or citric acid?
What's happening is that the calcium is then complexed with the acid, and then you are allowed or able to then leach it out of the soil profile. That's what's happening. And at some point in time, when you leach it out like that, I consider that an almost permanent change versus binding the calcium to an organic complex like humic. And what happens when that humic is finally degraded by natural biological processes and calcium is then liberated all over again?
Got it. Okay. So, somebody asked here, are you saying I get more benefits from humic if I have high calcium soil? And what I'm saying is that in this study, when applied at 3 gallons per 1,000 square feet, 3 gallons per 1,000 square feet, when applied with an insoluble phosphorus source, And you have to take note of that. It did not work the same way with a soluble phosphorus source. I'm talking about an insoluble phosphorus source. So in this instance, rock phosphate. When you took an insoluble phosphorus source in a high calcium soil and you put down your humic at 3 gallons per 1,000 square feet, you saw increases in plant performance, statistically significant. So we're saying 10%, 25%, and 18% dry weights increases at 3 gallons per 1,000 square feet. That's what I was saying.
Right. And that all relates back to removal of calcium from the soil solution. And if it is, in fact, one of those typical, crude, non-fractionated humic products that, have some fulvic in there, then, of course, the fulvic can then go to work, chelating and mobilizing the desirable elements. But that's an awfully expensive way. I wouldn't say expensive, but that's a pretty labor-intensive way of doing it, because 3 gallons of humic liquid per 1,000 square foot is a lot of product you have to apply. That's a lot.
That's a significant amount of material.
Yeah, that's tons. And I'm just now wondering, what have you seen from applying rather concentrated solutions of humic? I've never done it myself because I've always, abided by the label recommendations of no more than 12 pounds per acre per year.
So I have only done it once, and that was at 12 gallons per acre is the highest concentration I've ever applied.
12 all at once. That's
and this was in a soil that was a pH of 5.5.
Okay.
It did fine.
Yeah, it did all right. Well,
but I also, my growing program is kind of aggressive. I'm going to be running after that, and this was a bare ground renovation. And between then and the end of the year, I also applied 3 pounds of N.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty, not maybe not what everybody else would do. Somebody asked, did the research show the percentage of humic to fulvic in those 3 gallons? No, it didn't. The only thing I know for certain is that it came from Sigma Aldrich. Ray, are you still there? Did it cut out?
No, I'm still here.
Okay. Is from Sigma Aldrich, and it does not state anything other than it being a carboxylic acid. It was here we go. It was chemically synthesized and has a quality level of 100. So a chemical synthesis would mean that we are dealing with a potassium hydroxide reacted lignardite. So as a general rule of thumb, B. Gill, is that when you see that type of extraction, you're about half of your of the humic percentage. So if it's 12% humic, as a general rule of thumb, and it's not exact, you might have 6% fulvic in that material.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Most of the time when I see extracted material like that, it's about half of what the humic fraction is.
Okay. So that then tells me that in your run-of-the-mill, where they don't state precise fractions of the fulvic versus humic, then you're talking about up to half of it may be fulvic then. Half of it. And I know that on my product that is supposedly pure fulvic, then the application rate on that is rather low altogether. Like they're suggesting no more than 1 pound per acre.
And I have to say, with fulvic and micronutrients, I have used low rates like that with good success. I think that's a great application. A micronutrient package with fulvic acid is badass. I don't care what anybody says.
I know, because if I ever am under pressure to get grass green, quick, I either add fulvic to my typical micronutrient package, or I make my own micronutrient package with manganese sulfate, magnesium sulfate, ferrous sulfate, and fulvic. Apply that, and I can literally see grass turning green, like right before my eyes in some cases.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
And the thing about that is that I can do that without any blackening.
Which is a symptom of toxicity.
Right. Of course, my rates on the actual metals are fairly low too, in that I'm keeping it at no more than an ounce per 1,000 square foot each.
And for an ounce per 1,000 square feet of each, and I see where a lot of times the recommendation on the label is it'll give you a wide window. We'll say 1 to 8 ounces per 1,000 square feet. And I think kind of the allure there is that when you apply it at 8 ounces per 1,000 square feet, all of a sudden it starts turning blue, and then you start chasing the blue again.
Well, my experience with the high rates is, here's what happens to me when I chase high rates. I go straight to black, then straw colored.
That's the big problem too, is that once it turns black, there's not really any there. Once you go black, it's not coming back.
Yeah. Once you go black, it ain't coming back. And for me, that darkening or blackening is my sign that I'm going to have to explain a scorched lawn to somebody. So I don't chase black.
Ray, we're gonna go down here to the. So we covered where in wheat we saw probability at a very high rate in a high calcium soil. When I say high calcium soil, I'm talking about people out there if you have a very high pH. So we saw increased plant performance at a very high pH, at a very high rate. So 3 gallons per 1,000 square feet. Okay. Now, we also came across a study here where actually a few of the studies that were cited where they were either doing a water extraction or they were using an acid extracted humic acid. Polo said she ain't coming back when she goes black. I wish I had my dove horn. I would sound the dove horn for that one, Polo. Then we come to realize that if it is a water extraction, if it is an acid extraction, you're actually dealing with the fulvic fraction, the low molecular weight fulvic fraction, not actually humic acid. You're dealing with almost a pure fulvic fraction at that point. Okay. Now, we'll talk about humic acid and when growing radishes. Okay. So I have kind of the same thing here, right? And the same person actually did the majority of these tests, going in and looking at it. And I'll kind of give you the distinction here of what's taking place. So again, we're dealing with humic acid, a 9.4 pH humic acid, a non-soluble phosphorus source, rock phosphate,
Mm-hmm.
high calcium soil, and radishes grown on it. And again, a very high rate applied, where we're talking about up there in the gallons per 1,000 square feet range. And we saw increased performance in radish. Would this be another example, as we stated previously, where the humic is reacting with calcium, leaving behind the fulvic fraction to do the actual chelation?
I would speculate that would be the same case, where you put down enough of this non-fractionated, undefined humic formulation, the humic is going to quickly react with the excess of calcium and take it out of soil solution. And again, what you're left with is the fulvic, which then chelates the phosphorus, chelates the micronutrients, and then that improves and helps plant performance.
All right. I'm going to kind of throw a curveball out there too, Ray, because I did a little digging into radishes, and the first thing I Googled was radish and root exudation. And I'm going to tell you about another study I came across. Phosphorus deficiency enhances root exudation of low molecular weight organic acids and utilization of insoluble phosphates by radishes. So in effect, what ends up happening is that if you apply a non-soluble phosphorus source, it elicits a deficiency symptom within the plant that will kick into overdrive the root exudation that takes place that makes these nutrients available again. Isn't that kind of interesting?
Actually, that's something I've known about for a long time, where vegetable crops, they tend not to suffer as many deficiency symptoms. They just suffer from a reduced yield, because what they're doing is they're redirecting all of their energy trying to mine the nutrients out of the soil. Whereas with our grasses, what I notice about our grasses is that once you get into the little 50 parts per million phosphorus range in soil, your grass starts turning purple. Your grass starts stunting. Whereas with vegetables, like root vegetable crops, what they do is your carrots and your radishes and your beets might grow smaller, but you won't necessarily see the deficiency symptoms unless you push that deficiency to the point where there's not even enough to sustain basic metabolic functions in the plants.
Well, that just kind of took a wild turn.
Yeah, because vegetables are a little bit different, because you go look at, like, especially your root vegetables, like your radishes, your turnips, your beets, your carrot. Those guys, they have a pretty massive root, don't they?
Yeah, we're talking about a huge root. I mean, it's to the point that it actually feeds people.
Yeah. That goes in your soup or your salad or whatever. So the thing is that there's a huge difference in what the visual response of the plant is, and that difference can be attributed to the fact that if there is a slight deficiency, the root exudation and active mining of phosphorus from the soil just goes into overdrive in the case of that radish.
So it doesn't necessarily parlay with the ability of turf grass. So we may be looking at two totally different deals there, where a radish has such a massive ability to divert energy towards exudation that. And the other piece too is that nobody really cares about the foliage of a radish. You're growing it for what takes place below ground. What happens above ground is really just no point. Versus on the turf grass, when we're talking about maximizing aesthetics, any additional effort we put on that plant to do more work than necessary could result in discoloration or a lack of aesthetic.
Well, I go even further in that my whole premise of, turf maintenance is I don't want to make the grass struggle unnecessarily for anything, because it is already under a fairly high stress environment. It's being mowed low, it's being walked on, and in my case, water's often limited. And so, do I really want to play around with making turf grass try to mine its own nutrients out of the soil? I don't think so. I really don't think so.
I feel like we kind of I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a weird thing that it's an arguable thing. I have gone through every study I could get backdoor access to. Big shout out to Brandon Falk for helping me get access to some of these. And even though I may be looking at six different studies here, it all falls into one of those three categories as far as what we've actually seen, where actually we're dealing with the fulvic fraction because it's either water extracted or acid extracted. And we know humic fraction is only soluble in high pH, therefore it can't have humic acid, therefore it has fulvic acid in it, which is soluble across a wide range of pHs. So we have that piece of it. And then the second piece is where we're dealing with specifically in high calcium soils, where we're applying significant rates of high pH humic material, which means it has humic and fulvic. Or we're dealing with a plant that you're not too terribly concerned with the look of what's happening above ground.
Yeah, you're not overly concerned, except I know in Asia, for example, the radish tops are actually another vegetable. I mean, we use it in stir fry.
Yeah, I was going to say my wife will cook them, saute them with damn soy sauce and butter, and we'll eat them, or even she'll pickle them. Yeah, I know.
Yum.
It's good stuff.
Yum. Okay. So the thing is that we're just talking about totally different things, but at the end of the day, I condense it down to what I just said about how when I'm working with turf grass, I keep certain things in mind, like the fact that I'm mowing it low, I'm already limiting water, and I have people walking all over it all the time. So does it do me any good to then play a game of making the grass they have to look for its phosphorus? Does it do me any good?
Yeah, and when it comes to just general solubility, I mean, it's not really an arguable fact. It's just a matter of chemistry that the two don't mix together. And, that's why I did the whole thing where, you you take potassium phosphate and or phosphoric acid, and you mix it with a humic material, and it solids out. It just does. I mean, that's just a simple fact of chemistry. So beyond that, if you're somehow going to apply a phosphorus and humic material, it's not to say you can't do it, but in terms of maximizing your dollar spent, when you practice, what do you practice, Ray?
I pay materials, folks. I pay materials. I mean, I turned that politically correct statement into the reality of our industry and our business. I mean, I pay materials.
So when you pay materials, when you've got money coming out of your pocket to generate a specific result, why spend money on something that is, in effect, not giving you what you're paying for? It's not to say that the plant can't root exudation, start taking it in, eventually start taking it up, and then you start your cycle over. It's not to say that can happen. That does happen. Turf grass is a beautiful thing that is adapted to nature, and all of that will happen. But the only thing you're doing is delaying that time frame from when you can and you will have phosphorus available to the plant.
Yes, that is, and that is my issue. Is that okay? Once we've made that, water insoluble complex, I'm not expecting you to know the answer to this, but once we've created that water insoluble complex with potassium phosphate and humic, then if we were to say dry that out, granulate it, and then spread it, when is that phosphorus then going to become available to the grass or the plant? Inquiring minds want to know, and you see that is where, like with what I do, I want to be able to say, okay, I need an application this afternoon. So what is the grass going to do with that application? When is it going to start doing that? And for how long is that effect going to last? Those are like my questions whenever I mix my tank. What is going to happen once I spray this stuff out?
And again, another topic I feel like we kind of beat to death is controlling each aspect of the plant from a growth perspective, right?
Right. Because, I tell my customers up front that I'm not your mowing guy. I am actually here to control and manage the growth of your, lawn and landscape plants. That's my actual job description. That's my actual scope of work.
Yeah. So if you Lawn Junkie just posted something in the chat. It was funny. I saw it and it made me laugh. But at the and especially the more higher maintenance, I guess the higher quality turf you want to have. And I don't want to say, I want to make this clear, just because I'm talking about, I'm not saying if you have 4-inch tall fescue, you don't have high quality turf. That's not what I'm saying. But my point is that it requires two almost totally different management practices to go from 4-inch tall fescue to 1/2 inch Bermuda grass or 1/4 inch Bermuda grass or a 1/4 inch zoysia grass. There's a huge gap there between those two management styles. And as you start increasing your degree of difficulty, because that's what happens, is you take your height of cut lower and lower, you're increasing by a factor of difficulty. And as that increases, that's when control becomes even more imperative.
Yes, very much so. I mean, one of my good friends here in Hawaii is he's a sod grower, and the best thing that this guy told me, because in his former life he was a golf super for one of the golf courses here, is he sat me down and he told me, Ray, you are basically maintaining the equivalent of golf grass in people's lawns. He said, you're not dealing with a normal lawn anymore. That's what he told me. And I took his words to heart. And to me, that's why this whole issue of understanding my inputs and knowing the effect of my inputs has, it has really been burned into my brain versus me randomly spreading stuff or spraying stuff and, just saying, it'll be okay. It's not going to be okay. I need to know what's going to happen after I make that application.
Yeah, and that's why again we kind of go back to this, that if you're doing something like you're going out there, you're going willy nilly, you're spraying your humic acid every week or whatever you're doing on 4-inch tall fescue, do you really have anything to lose? No. Are you hurting anything?
Yeah.
No. Are you gaining anything? Probably not. You take it then to a 2-inch Bermuda grass. Are you hurting anything? No.
Mm-hmm.
Then you take it to 100,000 7-inch bent grass. Well, you got to be a little bit more careful there.
Yeah, or even Bermuda grass at or below 0.2 of an inch. Don't ask me how I know.
Exactly. That's just another degree of difficulty there when control over what you're looking for is so important. I mean, and this is on a logarithmic scale here. That as you begin taking it to a quote unquote unnatural height of cut, control is the name of the game. That's why you don't see these things going down every week, every other week on a USGA green.
Yeah, you don't. It's not done.
But you can take it. You can take it to a 4-inch tall fescue lawn on native soil, growing in the Piedmont, and do it. And okay, it's your money. If you so choose to do that, by all means, have at it. Have fun.
Go for it.
Yeah, just
go for it.
Be careful mixing it with your iron so it doesn't clog up your sprayer or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm. But when you're talking about, grass at that level, the understanding needs to be that you are also maintaining that grass at what I consider lower yet sufficient levels of nutrients so that the grass doesn't suffer stress. Because in the case of your 4-inch tall fescue, you have a lot of leeway. You have so much leeway. The only determining factor, I guess, at that point is how blue do you want that grass? How blue do you want it? I mean, that's your only question. Whereas, when I'm dealing with stuff that is 1/2 inch or lower, I have to think about, I can't let this starve. However, I also don't want to be making it grow so fast and so thick that I have to mow every day or even twice a day. That has to become part of the consideration. And I also have to think that there's an additional stress caused by me needing to mow that much. Think about that, because I can tell you that I'm even questioning that whole concept of people, say, over-fertilizing in the spring and their grass is literally growing 2 inches a day. I'm even questioning that.
Yeah. Well, all right. This is what I'm gonna do, Ray. Let me take a break, and I'm gonna open this up to the masses and see if they have any questions. Is there any piece of this? This This is a relatively, this isn't complex chemistry, but this is chemistry intensive. I'll say that because you have to know pHs and different types of acids and whatever. So I'm going to open up. If you have a question in this vein, if it's a nasty question, I'm going to discard it and I'm not going to answer it. But I'll put it out there, kind of open, and let's see if we can have a general discourse among the viewership and yourself. So give me just 1 second here, Ray. I'm going to take a break. When we come back, we'll get a little further into it. All right, everybody. You're listening to Turfs Up Radio, your industry, your station.
Hey, this is Darren, your host of the Weekend Review here on Turfs Up Radio. Be sure not to miss a new episode every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. I'll be with a new guest contributor every week reviewing what you may have missed on Turfs Up Radio, and together we'll help you plan your week by getting you the most out of our Traffic on the Turf and Product of the Day segments. That's the Weekend Review every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. And remember, Turfs Up Radio, your industry, your station.
Hey, this is Jeff Hesser, senior contributor and co-host of the Weekend Review here on Turfs Up Radio. Can't make it to major green industry events, but want to stay connected? Don't worry, we have you covered. Be sure to download the Turfs Up Radio app or visit our website. We'll bring you the live coverage you need to keep you up to date with everything that happens in our industry. And to find out where we'll be next, simply visit greenindustryevents.com. That's greenindustryevents.com. And always remember, Turfs Up Radio, your industry, your station.
Every Wednesday night.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is?
Hump Night with The Duck. 7 Pacific, 10 Eastern. Only on Turfs Up Radio.
Hump day?
We have to put up with this?
The Rock! The hot place!
You're not the top.
Did I say something wrong?
The Duck. On Turfs Up Radio. Turfs Up Radio. Your industry, your station.
Are you a military family with a spouse on deployment away from home? Did you know that nonprofit Project Evergreen has thousands of volunteers across the country ready to help military families with lawn, landscape, and snow removal services? We call it Green Care and Snow Care for troops. If you are a military family and would like to receive this free service, or if you'd like to volunteer to help, visit projectevergreen.org. Project Evergreen, creating a greener, healthier, cooler Earth, 1 yard at a time.
Okay, we're back. Ray, actually, believe it or not, we didn't have a whole lot of questions, but anyway, I figured we'll go ahead and explore this because I feel like this may be a lingering question that people may just be a little bit nervous about asking. And the statement is, so basically, Humic is, and I'm going to use this loosely. I'm not saying this at all, George here, but so basically, Humic could be potentially hard on the money aspect, but when in reality, Fulvic is the winner. Basically, is Humic a waste of money and Fulvic the real winner?
It depends on what you're trying to do.
Yes. Okay. So that's perfect. And that leads me into the next question. Let's talk about where are the instances that you see Fulvic is a clear winner and the good choice to go to.
Fulvic is actually what I would be using if I'm trying to maximize my nutrient uptake and, solubility. Like, for example, if I'm trying to get my iron, my manganese, and my magnesium into the grass and the plants as soon as possible, that's what I'd be using. But on the other hand, and I've maintained this position from the start, to me, Humic is strictly a soil corrective type material. In other words, I don't like to see people foliar spraying Humic on anything. I rather see them drenching that into the soil in amount such that it can get into the soil and interact with the soil and do things like sequester excessive calcium, for example.
So I think that's a good thing. And one of the things you've talked about before too is an ability to flocculate. So and I want to be clear that there's a very specific instance where it could be a tool used in the toolbox in that scenario. You can't just go apply a high amount of humic acid and expect it to flocculate the soil. Your general recommendation is you have to do a bicarbonate or carbonate flush first, then come in and do a humic application to offer any kind of flocculation. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, that is correct, because if you are not careful about applying humic to non-pH, non-carbonate corrected soil, you can literally turn that soil into deflocculated soil that is more like the texture of swamp mud. Not good, yeah?
No, not good at all.
Not good at all. And I think you and I have seen an instance where somebody tried to amend their soil with alkaline humic products, and instead he came back to us and he asked, how come my soil is now turning into the texture of grease? What happened? And that is because of that alkaline soil being treated with an alkaline-based humic. And in these alkaline humics, there's often an excess of potassium hydroxide, right?
Yeah, because in order to maintain a high pH, you can't just do that with water. Some waters, maybe you could get up to an 8 or so, but when you're talking about maintaining an alkali solution, you're having to add an alkali material like potassium hydroxide to keep it in solution.
Yeah, in order to keep it in solution. And then when you keep on putting that onto a already alkaline soil, you're just adding alkalinity. You're not taking the soil in the correct direction, actually, because believe it or not, I've even toyed with the idea of, in cases where I need to really bring down someone's soil pH rapidly, I even toyed with the idea of adding potassium hydroxide to my calcium hydroxide spray, if you can imagine that.
No, I can't. I would never do that, Ray. Only you.
Yeah, no, really. I've seriously considered adding, some KOH to my, hydrated lime suspension and then drenching that in. But then that's an example of what potassium hydroxide, as is typically used in these humic products, can do. That is literally an extreme alkaline material. That's extreme.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it is. It is extreme.
So, in my logical brain, I'm asking myself, why are we being told to apply a solution containing KOH to already alkaline soil? Why are we being told to do that? Because I think it should be the other way around, where we should be applying more acid forming materials to high pH soils.
Okay, so here's another scenario here, and this is Telly. We all know and love Telly, and Telly said, "With my Bermuda lawn, where is the benefit of humic?"
There is another instance where I like humic, and then there's another instance where I don't think it gives me the IPM And I don't think humic is particularly beneficial on soils that have a high clay content. Not unless our goal or objective with that high clay soil is to attempt to flocculate it. But then that flocculation can only happen if your soil is low carbonate. So it might possibly be helpful, but here's the other caveat to that. If you're going to do that, it's not going to be with a foliar spray. It's going to be with humic that you then have the capability of watering in. And it's also going to be quite a bit of humic as well. I'm talking about 12 pounds per acre equivalent per year. I mean, I don't actually dish on humic because to me, I affectionately refer to humic as compost or organic material that is sprayable. Okay,
yeah,
I don't.
It is.
I don't hate humic.
Yeah, it's a liquid, concentrated organic matter with minus the NPK fraction of it.
Yeah, yeah. It's yeah. I don't speak badly of humic entirely. I just disagree with the idea that it is the answer for everything.
Yeah, and I think really at the end of the day, that's the whole purpose of this is just to say that when it comes down to the dollar spent, and if the dollar spent doesn't mean anything to you, then by all means have at it. Just don't expect anything miraculous to happen. In the same essence that really with any toolbox, you're never going to see anything miraculous. And if you want to see something, what would be most considered miraculous, start with basic agronomy. That's the difference between success and failure. When it comes to moving into these types of things of, trying to, and if you don't have the experience of trying to figure out how do I flocculate the soil, how do I flush carbonates and all this fun stuff, well, this is the point of us talking to teach how to do that to make sure that your dollar spent on something like humic is utilized effectively.
And that I only worry about, like, after I have my soil pH in range. And in fact, if you want to talk about a product that is almost, quote unquote magical, but it's not magic because it's just basic agronomy that's not addressed, is I can look like a very good guy if I just apply some 111 and micronutrients to a lawn. I can look like a very good guy.
The most, and this is hilarious that, and probably not everybody in the live view here is part of the professional group, but in the professional group, the most hated fertilizer on the market is the 13, the 1-to-1-to-1, the 13, because you can get it anywhere. Everybody's got access to it, and there was a time, a long time ago. This is back in my early days, real early days. The way humic is approached now, that if you got a bump on your knee, put a little humic on it. You got a dead spot, put a little humic on it. You got a little disease, put a little humic on it. Where now that has become the solution. It used to be 13 where I was.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember in Memphis, and that was what you kept on the truck to fix any problems. You kept a bag of 13. You got a yard that isn't doing right, put a little 13 on it. And so I guess that may be how it kind of got its reputation. But in reality, at the end of the day, there's a reason why that legitimately fixes things, because the majority of the time, when you're running into these types of issues where you're lack of response or something, address your NPK first. Then
address that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then worry about your other supplements and growth processes, because I can tell you that anybody like in my area that knows their business and has not bought all of the dogma and the nonsense, they themselves, we have this product here called Yara 16-15-15. Okay, we have that product here. And anybody that works with turf grass that knows what they're talking about and has not bought the hype, that's one of the things that they will routinely apply to turf grass here. I mean, knock off all of the, slow release this, biological that, whatever. They just apply 1-1-1. And they grow some incredible grass on that 1-1-1.
Because you're meeting the foundation of agronomy in that product.
That's right. That's right. And that is even on high stress turf where that grass has water limited, that grass is being mowed low. And then here's the big one. Every last damn grass clipping is picked up off of that property every time it's mowed. Okay? I mean, talk about a high-stress condition, because I know I tell people on the Discord and people on, your show, I tell people, your high nitrogen, moderate potassium, low phosphorus fertilizers were specifically designed, for example, for cool season grasses on good soil, and they're mowed high and no clippings are ever picked up. But then in talking with some people, okay, they're experimenting with golf green mowers on their lawn. Well, then guess what? That fertilizer intended for turf, not under high stress conditions, doesn't work for you anymore.
There's in the most simple of logical senses, because you're gonna hear things, and I'm kind of addressing the crowd right here. You're gonna hear things that by using a Humic product, you're going to be able to replace the amount of nitrogen you apply. Or by using a Humic product, you're going to be able to unlock things in the soil. Or by using a Humic product, you're going to be able to eliminate the need for phosphorus to be applied. But there's a reason. There's a reason why it is an industry standard regulated by the EPA that you list 3 numbers proud at a minimum size on a label. You have to have literally a minimum font size on a label. And the reason why that those 3 numbers are so imperative is because those 3 numbers, what they stand for, are the most imperative parts of growing anything. That's my soapbox.
That has been the regulation long before I was even born, that your 3 elements has to be listed in the form of total nitrogen, phosphorus pentoxide, and potassium oxide. That is like the federal standard that is not negotiable in any way, shape, or form. It cannot be hidden on the label, and that is because those are the 3 most crucial and important elements. On the other hand, Humic. Did you know that Humic becomes basically totally unregulated by any authority unless that Humic product has claims of growth regulation or growth stimulation not attributable to nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium? That's why, for example, in my state, a lot of these, humic-based and organic-based products are actually prohibited because my state considers them growth regulators, Matt.
Yeah,
and as a growth regulator, they need to be registered as a pesticide.
Yes, and you have to, you have to go through, get an EPA registration number for it, especially if you're going to make any kind of claim of growth stimulation, really.
Yeah. Growth stimulation or enhancement of root growth. Oh boy, that's a big one. I mean, you place that claim on the label, and that product is not allowed in my state, for example. That's why, for example, a very famous line of products is not allowed in Hawaii, for example. Not allowed because there are claims of, root growth stimulation that are not attributed to nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium.
Well, I'm not seeing any questions that are being hammered at us right now. I thought there'd be a little bit more pushback on some of this. One of the comments here, Chad said that when his pH was as high as a 7.7, and he added Humic, he said it had a greasy texture and actually had the smell of an alkaline material in it. So. Kind of a interesting take there, where it's realized out in the field, and I kind of want to summarize things, and this is where I was talking to Brandon Falk, as we were picking through and looking at these different things, it was actually uncovered in one of these studies here. And it said effectiveness of humic acid regardless of its source and type of container soil differed with plant species, and also soils. The different soils, regardless of the type of humic acid or whatever the case, and the plant species, is going to have different outcomes. So it's hard to predict what each one is going to do in a given circumstance unless you take control over that whole circumstance to achieve the type of response you're looking for out of it. If you're looking to capture those claims you see out there that, it's going to stimulate growth or whatever the case may be, you have to meet a certain criteria in order for that to happen. And if you don't have control or knowledge over that criteria, then really at that point, it's throwing handfuls of doo-doo at the door, wondering what's going to hang on. Now, I'll reverse back into that and say that if you took the initial standpoint of correcting NPK and started just there, there's going to be a very high likelihood that the desire to even reach for something additional outside of that is going to seem like a pretty low on the totem pole thing to even really want to do. Because chances are you're going to be extremely satisfied with what you've got going on. Now, there may be those specific circumstances where you're trying to eke those few extra percentage points of improvement. And then...
Yeah, then there may be a time, right? There may be a time, and I know that I do it too. I do it too because I'm trying to support the turf grass without adding yet more, actual NPK to it. That's when I consider using something like Fulvic or, correcting the soil texture with Humic. I mean, but that is not before I've covered the basics. And what are my basics? Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, micronutrients, and soil pH. Those are the things that I work on first before I ever consider, adding or altering, the soil chemistry even further. So I work on that first, always.
I'll give you two more things to add to that, and that would be water and sunlight as well.
Yeah, water and sunlight as well. I work on all of those things first because I'm going to be the first person that will sometimes tell people, you have a choice here. You need to say goodbye to your trees or you won't have a lawn. Other times I've had to tell people your irrigation system needs some serious work, and I don't care what Joe Blow told you because that guy's a moron. I mean, I've had that conversation with quite a few of my customers, is that first, before I even talk about, dealing with NPK, micronutrients, and pH, I told them, I need water and sun. You're right, Matt. That comes first, actually. Thank you for correcting me.
Well, I know, and I think about all the times when people approach me and they're like, "Hey, I've got this issue. I've got this big tree and the grass fizzles out every year. Do you think can I put a little humic on it?" I'm like, well,
yeah, right. Because for me, I'll give the tree something. I'll give the tree something, all right.
Ray, Tiffany asked here, what about tilling humic and fulvic into the soil with, say, like even a biochar source as well?
Okay. Now,
I'm gonna recommend. You go ahead.
I'm gonna ask, why do you want to even do that? Because, to be honest with you, there's a special circumstance when I will even want to do that to a so-called soil.
And I'll give you a little bit more. And her major concern is that her yard just had so much limestone of it. She's pulled out over 4,000 pounds so far of limestone rock.
Okay, I'm gonna tell her, ma'am, save it. She should instead be tilling in about 250 pounds of sulfur per 1,000 square foot.
Yes, elemental sulfur. That would be my recommendation too, because Tiffany, I'm going to tell you right here, in my experience, biochar in and of itself as a singular product is going to cause more problems than benefit. And I am a manufacturer of a biochar product, and I'm telling you right now, don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it. And I'm going to tell you the specific circumstance where I would be in favor of adding, biochar or even granular humic to a soil media. And that would be if I were attempting to establish grass on pure sand. Because that humic and that biochar then becomes a base to which my NPK can bind to and then be slowly released back to the turf grass rather than just reaching right through. That's the only time that I would be in favor of it. Otherwise, if I'm dealing with a soil that does have some clay minerals in it, I consider it a waste of money.
Tiffany said, well, the softwood is acidic. Yes, but again, the problem there is that biochar has such a high adsorptive capacity is that it can bind on to those nutrients and not let them go at all. In order to allow biochar to even begin to want to release things, you have to do something to slow down that reactivity, that binding ability. Normally, the only way I'm aware of being able to do that is to either treat it prior to pyrolyzing it with iron or co-compost it. Those are the only two ways I know to do that. I've been digging into it for a long time. So I would not recommend doing it. Like Ray said, if it was pure sand and you need to increase the cation exchange capacity of the soil or increase the anion exchange capacity of the soil, in that instance, at a very low percent by volume, it would make sense. But if you're just dealing with a yard in Texas with, shallow limestone, reaches the surface full of limestone, that's where go ahead and apply something that has a much larger capacity to correct those long-term issues of having so much calcium available.
Yeah, that's just more, return on investment, because you said something very important, cation exchange capacity. And to be honest with you, I stopped worrying about cation exchange capacity as long as I get a number over 10, I stop worrying about it. I stop worrying about doing things to raise it because, in fact, I typically deal with soils that have cation exchange capacities of 20 and over. And I run into the opposite problem of that anything that I apply to the soil gets locked up and I don't know where it goes or when I'm going to see it again. So that's the other. I think that's my other message is, folks, please do not chase a high CEC. You actually don't want it. When you actually have it, you'll realize that you don't want it.
You know, she states her soil is a pale beige, and it just seems like it's wrong being that color.
No, there's nothing wrong with it. There is nothing wrong with it at all. And I'm going to tell you that chances are you acidify that soil a little bit, you start growing turf grass on it, that soil will darken up just fine.
Yeah,
I wouldn't worry about the color about it right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing is that as you get plants growing on it, you will see a natural darkening of the soil. And it doesn't matter if you're dealing with the reddest of clays in the heart of Atlanta. The longer you get something growing on it, the faster it begins to correct itself.
Yes, and that is what I think has been cast aside is there's so much focus with these various products promising to quote unquote fix your soil. Like I remember you had me review that product on the live show. What was that? A couple weeks ago, right? That product that promised to fix the soil. Well, gee, if you want to fix soil, first thing you do is pay attention to basic agronomy first. Pay attention to your nutrients, pay attention to the water, the light availability, and then anything after that becomes very, very superficial and less important. Because plants, I always tell people this, plants take care of themselves as long as you give the plants what they actually want. That's what I tell my customers. Plants and grass, the lawn will take care of itself as long as you're providing it with the basic needs: water, light, nutrients, and a properly pH-adjusted soil.
When you take a soil test, and the whole premise of taking a soil test is to understand what you're working with and to quote unquote give you the data you need to be able to fix your soil. And what the information you take from that soil test that is pertinent to fixing the soil is to applying nutrients. There's nothing about that soil test that pertains to fixing the soil with something that is not involved with N, P, or K. And maybe debatable with the CECs, but I'll leave that alone for now.
Yeah. I mean, we'll leave that alone.
Some tests don't even test for CECs. And you'll just get back a P, K, Cal, and Mag. The most basic of soil tests you see. And that's why at the very base of it all, at the very root of it all, it's an understanding you have to apply nitrogen. There's no reason to test for it unless you're getting into weird things. So at the root of it all, the most rudimentary, basic ways of quote-unquote fixing the soil starts with phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and magnesium in your pH. I've seen some what is it, the state extension services, where it is literally P, K, and pH.
Yep. And believe it or not, I can actually gain all the information that I need to know off of just those numbers. I can get the information that I need to know to deal with somebody soil just by that. And because I know there's been many times where I tell people, for example, go get the cheap soil test from University of Hawaii. It'll only cost you $15, and they'll get back to you in a week or two with the results. And based on that information that they got, I was totally able to fix what their problem was and fix it long term.
And it's not anything magic, but there's a reason why when you apply a soil test, when you use a soil test to fix your soil at the most rudimentary of ways, the only thing you're actually doing is fixing the nutritive value. The way you fertilize is actually what fixes the soil. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of it is noise. We got
it's all noise.
As we're winding down, we got one right here. Somebody said Magical Plus, which is, and I'll tell you right here, this is from Jonathan Green, and it is gypsum, iron humate, calcium carbonate, humic acid, and biochar. Rapidly raise soil pH.
How do you raise soil pH with calcium sulfate?
You don't.
It doesn't happen because that's an example of one of those products where what they promise you is a lot better than what that product is capable of doing. Because my idea of a magic rapid pH, adjuster would be, it would literally be prilled or pelletized calcium hydroxide with maybe some potassium hydroxide in it. That would be my idea of a magic cal, pH raiser.
Yeah, when I see this, literally, it's just trying to capitalize on things that people perceive to be cool, and hoping for the best. There's none of the ingredients in here make sense. An iron humate, so an insoluble iron source, gypsum combined with calcium carbonate, combined with humic acid and biochar. Just none of it makes sense. And this is totally a play on people's emotions. And that's why when you look at the label, they definitely don't want to tell you what's in it, because if they did, people would look at this and be like, this is silly. Helps loosen hard soil? No. Helps raise soil pH? Probably not at the rate that this is recommended to be applied. In fact, let's see where they recommend it. It should be applied using for seeding and sodding. Oh, okay. Water in application for 15 minutes. Can be applied any time of the year. I don't even see a rate on this.
I would guess that it would be like about
3.6 pounds per thousand. My ass. Get out of here. Get out of here.
Are you serious? Are you serious?
3.6 pounds a thousand. Go
okay.
home.
Go home, go away, because I told you, in cases where I really need to get somebody's pH down yesterday, my application is 5 pounds per thousand of hydrated lime, calcium hydroxide, right? That's, actual meaningful pH correction, and that'll get a soil from 5.5 all the way back up to 6.5 in a hurry. It'll get it up fast.
But we've got hang on, Ray. I've got to end the radio show real quick, and then I can hang on just a little bit longer. So I'm going to say, everybody, thank you for tuning in today. We will see you live on Turfs Up Radio again on Monday. All right, we're still live on YouTube, so we can keep going.
Yeah.
Yes, this no way. And the part that really chaps my ass is that the only thing they list on here is that it has 1,682 pounds of ECCE per ton, meaning this doesn't even have the liming power of just straight calcium carbonate. This has less liming capacity than frickin' lime.
Right, and that's because calcium sulfate or gypsum is not a liming material at all. It has zero ability to, alter soil pH. Zero ability, folks. I mean, so why even do that? Unless, of course, wait a minute. I know where this is going. This is another one of those products that would fit into that Albrecht method of soil balancing. There, I said it. Yeah, I said it.
Are we going down to BCSR route? Are we going to go there, Ray?
We're going to go there because what that theory says is that all you need to do is get the right ratio of calcium and magnesium and potassium in your soil, and once you get that correct ratio, all your problems with your soil are automatically solved. Okay?
The magic ratio! The magic ratio!
Yeah, the magic ratio, Matt. I mean, yeah, as long as your calcium, your magnesium, and your and your potassium are correct, then all your problems are automatically solved. Never mind actual soil pH, because according to Albrecht, if your ratios are correct, your soil automatically goes to, I think, between pH 6.5 and 7 or something, like that. The numbers sound right. I'm not sure, but I can tell you right now that I actually have soils that are in that approximate ratio, and my damn pH is 7.5. Okay? I don't know what I'm doing wrong, Matt.
I don't know. What are you doing wrong, Ray? I don't know. What happened?
I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. All I know is that at that point, you know what I call that? I call that a sulfuric acid deficiency. Okay, I call that a sulfuric acid deficiency in that ground is missing a gallon of 95% sulfuric. That's what it's missing. So, it's all going back to that idea that you don't need to add lime. You don't need to worry about, sulfur or acidifying agents. As long as you can push your calcium and your magnesium ratios into that right spot, your problems are solved, Matt.
Ray, I'm going deeper on this Magical Plus acidic label, and now there is another one. It says, for hard, compact soil, supplement with our new American Lawn Program, Love Your Soil product. Do you want me to look at the label for this and tell you what's in it?
Sure, I might as well.
Yeah.
Okay. I might as well. I might as well know, because
the claims are it loosens hard, compacted soil, increases root mass and drought tolerance of turfgrass, spurs soil microbes to break down trapped, locked up soil nutrients, and it's rich in humates to help restore soil life and create a humus reserve in the soil. So let's take a look at the label and see what exactly we have in here. Yes. We have the exact same freaking product of calcium carbonate, calcium sulfate, gypsum, iron humate, but this time, instead of the biochar, we have molasses. A little lime, a little gypsum, a little iron humate, and molasses. And this product here is for lawns in hard soils. I didn't see a sun bitchin' thing on that label that told me it is for hard soils.
Wow. I mean, that is just nuts, because I don't know what molasses will do. No, wait a minute. I know what molasses will do. Okay. I did this to myself one time and I learned the hard way. Guess what happens when you apply a lot of molasses or sugar to a lawn? Guess what happens?
What happens?
You then rev up all of the carbon-consuming microbes to the point that those carbon-consuming microbes will also latch on to any nitrogen present in that soil and commandeer it for its own biological processes and therefore rendering the turf starved.
You know, I saw a study on thatch reduction using molasses, and this was, and they actually achieved statistically significant results 1 out of 2 years. And they were using a rate of 720 ounces per 1,000 square feet. That is 5.62 gallons per 1,000 square feet for like, you know, a 7% reduction in thatch, or an 18% reduction in thatch, or 24% reduction in thatch. What would you see visually if you applied 5.6 gallons per 1,000 square feet of molasses?
Well, what I'd probably see is the grass just turn yellow and stop growing because all of that nitrogen would be sequestered, unless, of course, they were also upping their NPK rate tremendously to compensate for that. That's what I would be seeing, probably. Because I remember you talking about a thatch digester, you know, that they use in the cornfields that consists of molasses and high nitrogen liquid.
Yes, and it was going down, and it was very specific the way they used it. It was immediately, I mean, following the international harvester, you've got a sprayer spraying right behind it. And they said if you did not hit it in that exact time frame, it wouldn't work for you.
And that is because what would probably happen is those corn stalks would then have a chance to dry out. And once the corn stalks dry out, then the molasses digester is no longer effective. Okay, that's my supposition on that. But molasses, normally molasses in a lawn will cause nitrogen depletion, and that just gave me an idea. I now know of another way to fix a turf area that's overstimulated on N. Okay, now I have a way to
Apply a bunch
fix
of
that.
sawdust.
Or actually apply a bit of molasses, and the nitrogen will then be taken up by the bacteria and funguses stimulated by that molasses, instead of being used to feed the turf grass. And maybe I'll get the benefit of thatch and organic matter digestion, because that entire process is oriented towards consumption of organic matter. There. I think I just fixed my problem.
You knocked it out of the park right there.
Yeah. So, but why on God's green earth would you want to feed or routinely apply molasses to a turf area? You see, this is my problem, is when people put out formulas out there for people to use, and they have no actual understanding of what the potential effect of their product even is. They have no understanding or appreciation for it. Like, because, for example, in my logical mind, I ask myself, why am I going to be putting on something that's going to sequester nitrogen to a turf area that's already struggling. Why am I going to do that?
The Sports Turf King just said, manage your nitrogen rates and water accordingly, and there's no thatch issues on cool season lawn grasses. And I could not agree more. Thatch is the biggest scam in lawn care.
Okay, I'll add to that, Ryan. There is also no thatch problem on warm season grasses if mowing practices, watering, and fertility practices are appropriate either. Because, Matt, in addition to the constant clipping collection in my town, you know what else is also a annual or every 6 month thing?
Top dressing with more nitrogen?
No. Extremely aggressive verticutting or dethatching.
I should have known you were going to go there. Yeah.
Extremely aggressive. And you know what? Do you know what causes these people to need to do that?
You're probably being a little too aggressive on the fertilizer.
Too aggressive on the fertilizer. They are mowing actually too often. And when they do mow, they're not mowing low enough. Wrap your head around that one.
You hate to see it.
Yeah, because what I tell my customers is, I tell them, I'm going to teach your grass not to grow and not to get thick. I tell them that's my actual objective. That's the objective of my program. I'm going to teach your grass not to get crazy, apeshit overgrown, and I'm going to teach your grass, to just stay down. That's my objective. I mean, in that whole 1/3 rule thing, I have a different interpretation of 1/3. I'm going to cut off 1/3 of the total height. Then I'm going to drop my mower another third, and I'm going to keep on going until I get that turf grass back down to a 1/2 an inch or lower. And it's all going to get done in one day.
Ray, I'm being summoned by the family. I'm going to have to run. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been a lot of fun. Again, more career suicide for me. So I don't know. Maybe I'll have to delete the video. Maybe I'll not. But I'm certainly
I don't know, because
I will keep you informed as I get the hate mail. In fact, I'll just forward it to you to reply.
Oh, goody, because like I told you, as I asked you, Matt, am I going to have to retain an attorney after this show? Am I going to have to get a lawyer? I mean, because I'm going to have to lawyer up because of what I'm about to say on this show.
If you know a good one, go ahead and put them in contact with me, just in case.
I don't know of any good ones right now, but then it's like, oh dear. I mean, it's like, that's like the possibility that we're going to have to lawyer up because, we basically doo-dooed on and trashed the entire, supplement industry.
Well, I think it's more so. It's just trying to understand where the tools fit in the toolbox rather than just thinking that they achieve some sort of magic status that isn't necessarily true.
Yeah,
effective use is positive use.
Right. But then with us, no, we just basically doo-dooed on everything that they were trying to sell us.
Yeah, now that part may come back to haunt me. I don't know. I'm gonna have to lay low for at least the weekend before I start talking about these topics again.
Yeah, because we basically doo-dooed on it, and that's just believe me. I mean, and I'm used to being in that position because here in Hawaii, they call me the lawn care renegade. Yeah, because I don't do that whole, mow too high, mow too often, and over fertilize at the same time, and collect all of my clippings. It's like I totally flipped that paradigm upside down, and
there you have it. All right, Ray, I got to run. Thank you, sir. And everybody home, we'll talk to y'all soon.
All right.
All right.